Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantif Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantif Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we begin today with chapter 4. It's called Jnana Yoga. We have seen that in the second chapter of the Gita, Krishna gives his basic philosophy. He deals with the Jnana portion a little bit more elaborately. Karma Yoga is briefly hinted at in the second half of the second chapter. He elaborated on that on the third chapter which we saw, which we just concluded. Now in the fourth chapter, if you read it's a beautiful opening verse in the commentary. If you have Sridhara's commentary with you, I'll read the Sanskrit and then I'll read the English. Avirbhava tirobhava avishkartum swayam harihi tatvam pada vivekartham karma yogam prashansati. The Lord Hari himself praises the way of action, Karma Yoga, in order to reveal the true nature of the manifestation and disappearance of an incarnation, and to discriminate between the two entities, that and thou. The Tattvamasi, one of the basic teachings in the Vedanta. So this verse discusses the relationship between that and you. In general, we might say that the crux, in some ways, of spiritual life is to discover how we are related to God. Although we may not all think about it in these philosophical terms, essentially what all of us are dealing with as spiritual seekers is clearly the world in which we live, ourselves, and a third entity generically called God, the being who is beyond this world, the being who is the source of this world. So there are three entities: me, the world, and the origin, the source from which all of this has come. And all that different religious traditions try to do is to provide a framework to show how these three are related. Now, there is no one fixed answer about how I'm related to God. And every one of us has to discover that relationship through our own introspection, through our own struggle, through our prayer, through our worship, and so on. And whichever relationship that we discover with God, we need to then guide our entire life true to that relationship. And because we are different, because, well, in a lot of ways we are similar, as human beings we are all similar, but there is diversity. Not all of us think alike, not all of us relate to the world around in the same way, which is why not all of us will necessarily relate with God in the same way either. So, for instance, some may see it, and again, before I go further, how we should relate to God is not so much a matter of intellectual analysis. It's not that, oh, these are the choices I have. Let me see which is the best choice. It never works out intellectually that way. It just happens in a natural way. And so some of us may naturally see God as the master and I am a servant of the divine. Or we might see God as a father or mother and I as a child of God. So there are different ways of relating. We could see ourselves, some have seen themselves as a God's friend, God as a dear friend. Some have seen God as the most beloved of their heart. There is nothing that they love more than God. So God as a beloved, God as a friend, God as a master, God as mother, God as father, God as even child. So, and then in more non-theistic terms, we can see that God is the whole and I'm a part of God. Or in a completely non-dualistic sense, the reality which God represents and the reality that I represent are not two different things. So there are infinite possibilities of how we can relate to God. And so this chapter deals basically with that relationship, how we can relate with God. And as always, Krishna will not lay down some dogma or doctrine which he will ask us to believe. That's never his style, that's never Vedanta style. The idea is to present the framework and then allow us, give us the freedom to explore it, relate it to our own life's experiences and see what we discover. So let's begin with verse 1. Please repeat after me. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanaham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit. The Blessed Lord said, "This eternal yoga I taught to Vivasvan, Vivasvat taught it to Manu, and Manu taught it to Ikshvaku." So two things. Whatever teaching Krishna has given up to this point, he refers to it as eternal yoga. By eternal is meant it has no beginning, it has no end. In other words, it's not something that he has discovered. It's not something that Krishna has started. He has given the teaching which has always been. So he is more a revealer of the knowledge that already is. Secondly, we might think that this teaching that Krishna gave to Arjuna, well, he gave it in the Gita. And the Gita may be so many thousand years old. And in the time of Mahabharata. No, but he seems to have given it much earlier. So what Krishna is saying is, this is not the first time I'm giving this teaching. I've given this teaching before. What this teaches us is that this is not even as old as the Mahabharata, which is quite old, according to many conservative estimates, at least 3,000 to 3,500 years old. But it's been even older than that because Krishna gave this teaching even before he gave it to Arjuna. So one thing we know, that what we are dealing with here is a time-tested philosophy, time-tested way of life. It's not something that is so recent that, well, we don't know how it will work. Verse 2. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduhu sakale neha mahata yogo nashtah parantapa. This yoga thus traditionally handed down, the royal sages knew. Through the great lapse of time, this yoga is lost in the world, O scorcher of foes. So this teaching Krishna had given long, long back. And it was passed from Vivaswat to Manu, Manu to Ikshvaku, and actually it just so happens that Vivaswat taught to Manu, Manu was the son of Vivaswat, and Ikshvaku was the son of Manu. So that's how, in those days, there were no schools to go to. So whatever expertise or knowledge, it was always handed over from one generation to the next, and it always happened in the family line. So if the father discovered something, then father would pass it on to son, the son would then pass it on to his son, and that's how it went. So that's how this teaching was given. And then we might say, well, if it was given so long ago, what was the need for Krishna to give it again? Why was it not passed down from one generation to the next? And that's what he mentions here. Through the great lapse of time, this yoga is lost in the world. We see that happening all the time, that such is the nature of the world, and more accurately the nature of human beings, that things get diluted. And that is why you need a periodical review. So even in big corporations, when you are making a product, there has to be a quality control. Because if there is no quality control for a long time, then things can get wrong. There may be slackness in the effort. Like the GM now, with all the ignition key and all the recall of vehicles. So it's very important that something may seem to be working well, but if you stop paying attention to it, then things could go wrong. And so this teaching that is passed on from one generation to the next, if everyone in that chain is not careful, is not mindful, then things can get diluted, things can get lost, and so on. And that is what happened, which is why then Krishna then is now again teaching it to Arjuna. Which is why also we have teachers and great prophets in every generation reiterating these teachings. Because we might say, well, it's already been given, what's the point? The point is that even though it is given, it gets ignored. And so it needs to be affirmed again and again. The second important thing in this verse is, he said, the royal sages knew. The word here is a Raja Rishi. It's a combination of two terms, Raja and Rishi. Raja means a king, and Rishi is a sage king. Now that was the ideal leader in the Vedic times. The ideal leader is not one who is a great king or a great administrator, nor is that ideal leader one who is just a great sage. The ideal leader is one who is rolled into one, with an ideal sage and ideal rishi into one. And you might see, it's interesting that the ideal, even in time of Greek thinkers and philosophers, they didn't have any high respect for democracy, which is now the mantra of the modern age. In fact, I believe it's Aristotle or someone who, or at least a quote that is attributed to him, is that democracy is the government of fools. Now that's a bit of a strong statement, but we have got to admit that democracy works on the assumption that the majority will always make the right choice. The majority will always do what is good. And we might say that, well, most of the time that kind of works, but it's not a rule. That there are times when the majority may make wrong choices. And we have plenty of examples, even in contemporary time, to see how democracy fails. So the ideal in ancient times was a philosopher king. In the Greek writings, you find the ideal of philosopher king. And that's exactly what this Raja Rishi is. And in Indian context, they might call it the sage king. The idea is the same. Now, it's true. it's not always possible to find an ideal sage and ideal king in one person. Someone may be great administrators, they may not necessarily be very spiritual. Some people may be very spiritual, they may not necessarily be good administrators. So that's true. That's one problem, that we may not always find the best of the two in one person. But it's important that Krishna points it out here to show that this teaching was known to these philosopher kings. The philosopher king Rajarshi is seen as an ideal prototype in any society. And when I say leader, I don't necessarily always mean a king as in one who's ruling the kingdom or a big country. To a smaller or greater degree, we are all kings. We are all administrators. At the very least, we have to administer your family. But that needs a bit of administration. There is a budget, there is a finances, there are things to be taken care of. It's like a little small kingdom. And so, in some ways, we all need administrative skills to a larger or greater, a smaller degree. And we need, of course, a spiritual outlook on life. So this ideal of a philosopher king is not only for those whom we see as leaders. We've got to recognize that a leader is a very generic term, that even every one of us is a leader at different capacities, in different circles in which we move. You may be heading a department in your workplace, or everyone, as I said, is a leader. As a parent, you are a leader of the family. As a teacher, you are a leader of the students, and so on. The fact that a sage king was seen as an ideal prototype of a person in any society was to show that the division we tend to make between this is spiritual and this is secular, or this is materialistic and this is spiritual, need to go. We cannot compartmentalize our life. Although in the beginning that's true with most of us. That's exactly how our lives are. We say, well, this is my religious work, and these are my other things. So as spiritual seekers, spirituality must become so much a part of our lives that the walls which divide my spiritual life from my other things, that other has to go. Has to go, by that I mean I need to spiritualize my entire life, which was the topic that we discussed about a week and a half ago, when we had a satsang on spiritualizing daily life. And that is the idea. The idea is that we cannot switch on and switch off our spiritual seeker identity at will. We shouldn't be doing it. So it's not like when I'm doing religious things, I'm spiritual, and the rest of the time I switch it off and I can become worldly. That's kind of we don't want to consciously lead a double life, like my spiritual persona and my worldly persona. That way I will neither be authentically spiritual nor authentically worldly. So it's good to be authentic. And as I said, don't worry, in the beginning, everyone's life seems compartmentalized that way. But the ideal towards which we are moving is to remove the walls and lead an undivided life. So that's what Krishna is saying, that this teaching he had given earlier, and over time it got diluted, and which is why now he is giving it to Arjuna. Verse 3. Sa evayam maya tedya yogav proktav puratanaha bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam yetaduttamam. That very ancient yoga has been taught by me to you this day. since you are my devotee and friend, for this is a supreme secret. Several important points here. First of all, he says, I've already taught you that yoga, which lends credence to what I said, that Krishna's teaching was given in the second chapter. Otherwise, he would have said, I'm giving you that yoga now, and 12 more chapters remain. He didn't say that. So, as far as Krishna was concerned, his teaching was given in the second chapter. He said, that's why I gave you that ancient yoga. Next half is also important. Since you are my devotee and friend, but this is a supreme secret. Now, why is this a secret? We read often in the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda that spiritual life is open and transparent. There are no secrets. If anybody says this is a secret, then you have to be a little bit worried about it. Why is it a secret? Why should it not be open and transparent? Transparency is a great thing that we all cherish. So the word secret that comes often, it will come often in the Gita, it often comes in other texts also. Now this is a secret not because it is something how would you say, secret in the sense that, something that cannot be told in public. It's something that will be very scandalous if told in public. So it's not a secret in order to hide something that needs to be hidden. This is a secret because, first of all, it is so sacred that if it is given to those who are not fit for it, then they may not only not understand it, but in fact misunderstand it. And therefore, all of these teachings have, in the beginning, they will say who is qualified to receive this teaching. And we know in everything in life, this is a system we are used to, that without a certain qualification, you cannot apply for certain jobs or even to certain schools. You need to do the different tests that you have, qualifying tests or interviews, before we are considered fit to take up any activity or project. So this is exactly in the same way here. One of the reasons it's secret because it cannot be given randomly, because it would not only be useless, but it could in fact do harm. Harm in the sense that some of these teachings wrongly applied can be self-destructive and destructive to others also. For instance, we saw in the second chapter of the Gita, this self cannot kill anyone and it can't be killed. And then suppose someone who has no sensitivity to this teaching just picks up this sense, so I cannot kill anyone and it can't be killed, and I am stainless and I am pure and perfect, so then let me take a gun and shoot people, because anyway I can't be killed and no one can be killed. Now that would be a terrible thing to do. So there is a lot of scope for misunderstanding this teaching if the person who is reading it is not ready for it. And so that is why Krishna says, I'm giving this, it's not just a secret, it's a supreme secret. And he said, I'm giving it to you because you are my devotee and friend. It's not so easy to be, by a devotee is meant one who truly loves God. And in addition, of being a friend of God. In order for us to love God truly, sincerely, there has to be some amount of ego reduction. There has to be some amount of clarity and purity. It may not be complete, it may not be full. We still have our egos. But something has changed. A little bit has changed. Otherwise we would be completely worldly. We would be completely materialistic. We would not even feel it worth our time and energy to spend an hour a week studying the book. Why would we? There are so many other things we could be doing right now. But that we feel it's time well spent studying this text shows that something has changed. It may be little, it may be very tiny, but unless that love for the Spirit had not entered our heart, we would not even have come for the study of this book. And Sakha, so as our love for God deepens, when we discover our relationship with God, and I mentioned before, what are the different possibilities that are. And so here, of course, the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna is that of a friend. It's interesting, it is both. Arjuna sees Krishna as the divine, and he's also a friend. In fact, later on, as we will see, when Krishna reveals himself in the 11th chapter in his cosmic form, and Arjuna sees he knows that Krishna is special, but didn't know how special. And then when he saw in the 11th chapter that big, the vision that he had, we see Arjuna actually is frightened. And ultimately he's awed, he's awestruck, and then finally he says, oh, please withdraw this form and let me just see you in your normal human form. And then, of course, so the relationship has become so close that it doesn't need the revelation of some great infinitude. They're just the friend. They're such close friends that bond is very, very close. So anyway, so here Krishna says, I'm giving this great teaching, which is a supreme secret to you because you are my friend and my devotee. What it means to us today is, to the extent I'm able to deepen the love that I have for God, to the extent I feel myself as close to God as a friend feels close to his or her friend, this teaching will make sense to me. In other words, think about it this way. If Krishna were to come to you and me, and he may have already have, or may come someday, would he feel like giving this great secret, supreme secret to us? Well, he gave it to Arjuna, and of course it's come to us. But suppose, and since he has given it many times, it's possible that he never said to Arjuna, this is the last time I'm giving it, I'm just tired of giving it. No, he may give it again. He might come tomorrow or tonight. And if he meets any of us, would he find us fit enough to receive this teaching the way he found Arjuna fit enough? Now, Arjuna is not a realized soul at this point. He just like you and me. He's a struggling seeker. So it's not that you have to be enlightened in order for Krishna to come. I mean, if you're enlightened, you don't need Krishna's teaching. So Krishna's teaching does come to the unenlightened, to the ignorant. So now, if Krishna decides to come and give the teaching again, of course, it would be a great, great privilege to receive the teaching directly from Krishna. Now, what should I do in order to make myself fit? When Krishna should come, that's in Krishna's hands. You really can't. We can pray, come, but when he comes, that's in his hands. But in the meantime, what I can do is I can then try to deepen the love that I have in my heart for God, for spiritual life. I can try to be as closely related, closely connected with God the way a friend is closely related with a friend. Then that supreme secret Krishna will give. Nor need we think that that teaching will come to us only if Krishna himself were to come. In some sense, it's possible to say that the generations of spiritual seekers who have been studying the Gita, it's Krishna's teaching itself that is coming to them through different sources in a different ways. So don't think that, well, if Krishna doesn't himself come and give it to me, then studying from the book is like second-hand. Don't think that way. So whichever form, whichever way we study the Gita, recognize that ultimately it is coming through Krishna's grace alone. It is through His grace that I'm sitting here. It is through His grace that you are sitting. It is through His grace that we decided to study the Gita. It's through His grace that you had time and interest and energy to come, and then we are all sitting and studying it together here. So all of this has become possible due to Krishna's grace. And therefore, we might say that Krishna is present here. And through His grace, we can hope and pray that the thoughts that we share here are the original intent of Krishna when he taught this teaching to Arjuna. Verse 4. Now Arjuna's doubt. I said this is a question-answer session throughout after the second chapter. So now after hearing this, Arjuna asks a question that any of us might ask. So Arjuna is really our representative. The kind of question that we might ask, he is now asking Krishna. Arjuna vacha aparam bhavato janma param janma vivasvataha kathametat vijaniyam Tvamadau proktavaniti. Arjuna vacha, Arjuna said, later is your birth and Vivasvat's birth earlier. How am I to understand this, that you taught this to him at the beginning? Well, of course it's a obvious question. Krishna says, I've taught this many times before, and he mentions names of the sages who have lived centuries earlier. And Krishna says, well, they were all much before. Actually, Krishna and Arjuna are more or less at the same age. And so it seems preposterous to say, oh, I taught this thousands of years ago. That was Arjuna's question. Now Krishna replies to that. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni me vyatitani Janmani tavacharjuna Tanyaham Veda Sarvani Natvam Vetha Parantapa. The Blessed Lord said, many lives have I passed through, as also yourself. I know them all, but you do not know them, O scorcher of foes. So Krishna makes it clear, yes, good question. I did not give this teaching in this same body, not as Krishna. So I have given it in a different birth. So I have had many births, and so have you. And so have you. Really, it's not just Krishna and Arjuna who have had many births. All of us have had many births. The only difference is Krishna remembers them all, and we don't. And I've said this on earlier occasions. Remembering a past birth, I'm not sure whether it's a blessing or a curse. Think about it this way. Our life, this one birth itself is complicated enough. Now to remember all the past births and take upon ourselves the complications of those, it would be overwhelming. Life wouldn't be worth living if we... I mean, even in this life, we forget most of the things. Some things we don't, but many things don't stick, which is good. So, when Krishna says, I remember all my past births, in what sense are we to take it? Well, you can take it in many different ways, of course. What is meant here is this, that it's not necessary, although it's possible, in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, says it is possible if we refine and strengthen our memory, it is possible to know our past births. though not desirable, as I said. So when it is said, I know my past births, what message should it come to us? What do we really mean? Or what should we do about it? The idea is not that we need to remember every detail of our past birth, but that at least remember that I had past births. What would that kind of thinking do? One thing it does is that we are able to see our life on a much larger canvas. That our present life is only one chapter of a very big novel, War and Peace, big novel. What spiritual seekers who seek freedom as the goal or moksha expect that this particular chapter of this novel is the last chapter, because then we are free from all this. Because if it's not the last chapter, then it's going to go again and again. So what would help us is not necessarily to remember every detail, as I said, but at least know at the back of the mind that we have had a long past, a past going even beyond our birth. So this kind of a broadening of our perception helps us to put things in the right perspective. And so, of course, because of our ignorance and our preoccupation with this world, we don't always remember it, of course. And that is what Krishna is pointing out here, that he himself remembers it all, but Arjuna, you don't remember it. The adjective he applies to Arjuna is good. O scorcher of foes. A very subtle way, and we don't know whether Arjuna got it. We ourselves don't get it all the time. But the idea is to assure Arjuna, don't be so nervous. Because remember, this is all on a battlefield. And Arjuna is nervous, he is confused. So by telling him, O scorcher of foes, Krishna is kind of hinting, don't worry, the result will be in your favor. You are going to be victorious. But that's not the focus of his teaching, of course. So he just very subtly addresses him as scorcher of foes. Now, this answer that, well, I have had many births and I know them all and you don't, answers Arjuna's question, but raises more questions. And it's always that way. You answer one question and sometimes then the answer leads to more questions. And the question is this, that in the second chapter, Krishna has said the self is beginningless, is birthless. If it is birthless, then how could you have had any birth? What to speak of many births, even any birth? Also, the self was described as indestructible. So how could there be any death? Because unless you die, you can't be born again. And unless you're born again, there cannot be rebirth. So the idea of reincarnation or rebirth assumes the reality of birth and death, both of which were denied in the second chapter. They said self has no birth, self has no death. We also know that God, the blessed, Krishna is referred to as the blessed Lord, Bhagavan. Now the blessed Lord is free from the law of karma. The Lord is beyond all laws. Because if the Lord is within the law, then the Lord becomes limited. If the Lord is infinite and omniscient, no law can bind the Lord. And so, if no law binds the Lord, if there is no karma for him, then how can even Krishna be reborn? Because we are born again and again as a result of our karma. So that was Arjuna's question. How can you speak about being born again and again when the self is birthless, it is indestructible, and as the Lord, you don't even have any karma. So how could you be born again and again? So that is the question. And that question, Arjuna, now that is the question really, it's not, this is an implied question. This is a question that Krishna recognizes that this is the sense because of which that question has arose in Arjuna's mind. And he now answers that unexpressed question here in verse 6. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san prakritim svamadhisthaya sambhavamyatma mayaya. Though I am birthless, immutable, and the Lord of creatures, yet resorting to my prakriti, I come into being through my own inscrutable power. So he answers that question. Yes, it is true that I am birthless. It is true that I am indestructible or immutable and the Lord of creatures, yet resorting to my prakriti. My prakriti here means Maya, really. It means my power. That in spite of this, I have the power to come into being. So here itself is we are already faced with a puzzle, that how come someone who is birthless takes birth? And that's how then Krishna introduces the idea of the avatar, the incarnation. Because that is a question. When we speak about birth as a result of karma, the self being birthless and deathless, and yet we say the Lord takes a human form. The divine comes down in a human form. So how do we reconcile this birthless spirit and the birth of that spirit in a human form? How do we reconcile the infinitude of the divine becoming finite in a human form? How do we reconcile the immortal nature of the divine somehow now limiting itself to mortality? That is the question. And what Krishna says is, it's possible by my power. Atma Mayaya, my own inscrutable power. Why it's inscrutable? Clearly, as I said, that it's not very logical, obviously. If something is birthless, for a birthless thing to take birth is not logical. For one without karma to appear as someone with karma is not logical. Is as illogical as a rope appearing as snake. And yet a rope is mistaken for a snake. So something which is, just as a rope can never become a snake, and yet we can mistake a rope for a snake. So something as illogical as that can yet be perceived, yet be possible, but not for long, clearly. When the light is switched on, you know that it has not really become a snake. Exactly in the same way, the avatar, the incarnation is possible. That which is birthless can take birth. But when the light is switched on here, inside, then we see that Krishna or the divine was always birthless. So it can, appearance of the human appearance of the divine can disappear as easily as the appearance of the snake disappears when the light is switched on. And so that is how then we come to this great 2 verses in this chapter, which really introduce which are very often quoted to understand what avatar means. So today we'll just read these 2 verses, and next time we will discuss them. Verse 7. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Whenever, O descendant of Bharata, righteousness declines and unrighteousness prevails, I manifest myself. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. For the protection of the righteous and the destruction of the wicked, and for the establishment of religion, I come into being from age to age. So next time we meet, we will begin with this verse 7 and 8. These are very important verses, so we'll need to discuss it a little bit more in detail. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. Gita lecture by another guest speaker, Swami Yuktatmananda ji. He is the head of our center in New York, the East Side Center, Ramakrishna Vivekananda Center. He will speak on the divine promises in the Bhagavad Gita. So that will be a very good preview of some of the things that we will study as we continue with our verse-by-verse study of the Gita. So next week, Gita will be a special lecture by Swami Yuktatmananda. And the week after that, I won't be here. Oh, yes, the week after that, I will be away in California. Yes, so UC Berkeley is having a program, and they've invited me to speak in a panel discussion there. So, so then we will meet after 3 weeks. So that will be, let's see, today's 2nd, 9th, 16th, so 23rd.
Yeah, you can Skype your meeting in.
Yeah. So next, okay, let me now get it clear. So next Wednesday, a guest lecture on the Gita. a Wednesday after that, holiday for you. And then we will continue with this study on April 23rd. This Sunday, coming Sunday, will be the Rama festival, and I've already told you what that is. So this Saturday, we will not have the Arati and meditation because we have to prepare for the festival the next morning. Next Tuesday, we'll have the meditation as usual. So I think that's it. Yes, and if you, many of you probably have already heard this on Sunday announcement, but if you want to have any ideas about what to bring for the potluck, if you're short of ideas, please meet with Hena, and then she will guide you or help you. Okay, so let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being become manifest unto us. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May the Divine bless us all and fill our hearts with infinite grace and love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.